Hello, everyone. I'm Charlie, and welcome back to another UCL semifinal DraftKings soccer slate breakdown. This is the second leg of the Real Madrid and Bayern tie. Interestingly enough, Real Madrid are minus favorites. The aggregate is tied at 2-2, and because of no away goals rule anymore, it is just basically just whoever wins this game wins. It's simple as that. Nothing else to really worry about. Both teams to score pretty high at minus 180 on yes. Goal total decently high again, similarly to the PSG tie or game we just had. However, like we saw, these odds aren't always going to be right. We saw Dortmund hold on, score a goal, and just manage to get out of there with a clean sheet win. Finish 2-0 on aggregate. It was pretty crazy. So yeah, these Champions League games, anything can happen. CB goals, just and like the showdown is always a different kind of ball game. In terms of projected lineups, Real Madrid almost unchanged. I think it was Nacho in for Camavinga and Chouameni in the midfield. However, I wouldn't be surprised if they ran this lineup. Could maybe see a Militao slide in for a Chouameni or Camavinga potentially. I think that's I don't want to say likely, but definitely a chance of it. However, most of these guys should be givens. I think Rodrigo, Bellingham, Vinny, Valverde, Carvajal, Mendy, Rudiger. They're all going to play for sure. It's just these couple of positions, this one center back and one midfielder. In terms of set pieces, if it's this team, Kroos monopoly. However, the drawbacks of him is that he doesn't cross every single corner. A and B, he gets subbed at the 70th minute a lot. And in a game that could go extra time, that's a little bit worrying. For Bayern, I don't know if this lineup's going to be right exactly. There are rumors that it'll be Gnabry over Muller, moving Musiala back central, and Pavlovic in for Goretzka. So we'll see how they line up here. Set pieces, however, are mostly Kimmich. Could see Guerrero in potentially, or I think he's injured. Yeah, he got that big ligament injury, so he's not going to play. But so it should be just Kimmich Monopoly no matter what. Maybe if they're getting frisky, Sane might split, but definitely on the lower likeliness of that happening. So yeah, those are the lineups and set pieces. Prices. Vinny Jr., 12-2. That is expensive. But this is a great matchup for him. He typically does better against possession teams since he's just super good on the counterattack, as we saw in the first leg when he really destroyed Kim Min Jae, just blowing by him. And definitely could happen again. Although it's interesting they have Dyer and De Ligt starting at center back now. I can see why that is after Kim and Jay's horror show. But still, they're not that fast. So Vinny definitely has the advantage in that sense. Harry Kane, 10,200. Could argue it's slightly underpriced for him for a guy who just scores so many goals in a game with a pretty high goal total. So he's in play and definitely a decision to make. Rodrigo, never my kind of guy. For cash, I don't really like him as a play. For GPP, he'll probably be pretty low owned. So I can see it from that angle. However, he's another guy who gets subbed a lot. I think that's going to be a big thing to think about considering extra time is pretty likely here. Or don't want to say pretty likely, but it's definitely a strong possibility, which makes him a little bit of a scary play. Now, Kimmich. For cash, you just plug him. This is a game with very, very little floor. When you think about Real Madrid, like none of these guys have real floor. Maybe Kroos, but he's not adverse to just randomly dropping a 4 or a 5 because Real Madrid don't dominate games ever really, and they don't really generate a ton of set pieces because of that. And when they do, Kroos doesn't always cross them. There's like a ton of hurdles to kind of cross for Kroos to have his floor. That's a little bit worrying there. But Kimmich, like he has a floor. He'll get his 9 to whatever he gets through getting corners and tackles and whatnot. So yeah, Kimmich is Probably arguably the only floor in the slate. Definitely the highest. You maybe argue Musiala has a bit of a floor too. Like he's always had just gotten a bunch of weird points like fouls drawn or crosses or key passes. It's never like a traditional floor, which is like crosses and key passes, but he just has an ability to just get some points there. Yeah, I was talking about Kimmich. Plug him for cash. For GPP, I don't think he was an optimal in that Real Madrid game. So there's definitely an argument to get off of him. But for cash, we're just going him just because he's certain points when there isn't a ton of those on the board. And that argument can go the same for Musiala too. Doesn't get sub usually. Makes him pretty solid. Like I don't mind that as a play either. Now Jude Bellingham, I think this is overpriced. Him and Benny Jr. are the kind of two most dangerous options in terms of goal contributions. And Jude is cheaper than all these other attackers. Like he's cheaper than Kane, cheaper than Vinicius, cheaper than Rodrigo, cheaper than Musiala. I really love Jude here. Has a bit of a floor to him. Like he'll rarely have a game where he doesn't get at least 5 points. He'll also rarely have a game without a goal contribution, which is pretty nice too. Although he's been not as good in these harder matchups. However, I have no problem going back there anyway. Luka Modric 8,200 if he plays. Another guy who has a minute risk. I don't think he's in projection. He just went 90 in their league game midweek, or not midweek, at the weekend. So I don't think he'll start. I'm not gonna spend too much time on him. Nabry 8K. To me, that's a little much for a guy who has not had a ton of minutes under his belt. Probably another guy who gets subbed pretty early if he's in. So he's an all right GPP play. He's another ceiling piece. For cash, he's just not the safest option. Same with Muller, another guy who gets subbed a lot. Now, Tony Kroos. I was all in on him when he was 5K, but now he's 2K more than that. It's a little bit harder when Vinny Jr. and a couple other guys have been priced up as well. Salaries are just a little bit harder now, and it makes him a little bit more of a scary play, especially considering this is a game that could go to extra time, like I talked about, and he's got to get subbed. Like he does not go 90 very often, especially recently. And they kind of got have like all these healthy midfielders back. I don't think they have any midfielders injured. Yeah, they don't have any injuries at all. But this means that they have like Camavinga, Valverde, Modric, all these guys can kind of play in his position. And Kroos is usually one of the first guys subbed when they make substitutions. Like Modric too, like they can definitely do that sub. It's pretty like for like. So it makes Kroos a little bit of a worry in that sense, but he's the only floor on their entire team, which is the argument for him. So he's the decision. Same with Sane. Sane, similarly to Kroos, or similarly priced to Kroos, I mean. Got that goal last game. He looked like he was really playing well that game too. I think he's in play. Him and Kroos, I think if it was a 1-for-1, is a real debate over which one you go. Even Lunin you could throw into that. So good thing about goalkeepers in these games is that they are guaranteed 120 minutes, almost always. Sometimes you'll see some random goalkeeper sub to the 120th for some penalty tackles. That happens very rarely too. So Lunin, I think is an all right play, genuinely. Because of the way Real Madrid play, like they invite a decent amount of pressure, which usually means leads to shots, which usually leads to saves. Makes Lunin have an ability to get there that way too. I don't think he had a ton last game, but if Real Madrid score early, I like don't I could see them really starting to sit back and Bayern starting to dominate the game. And Lunin could take a ton of action, face a ton of action, make a ton of saves, similar to what we saw with Kobo, even though Real Madrid are at home. Valverde, I don't mind 5,400. He's a guy who also never gets subbed. Like, look at that. He's had a ton of games in a row of going 90 plus. Not been super productive in that time. However, he does get the odd goal here and there. He could be even worth throwing into cash just because you need some salary saving somewhere, and 5K is pretty fair for a guy who gets a ton of minutes. And if he's starting out wide, it's an added bonus too. Carbajal, Davies. Davies wasn't projected, was he? No, they're continuing to have Mazraoui there. I think he's just a little bit out of favor. Carbajal, He's all right. Real Madrid don't have the most offensive fullbacks. However, Carvajal's definitely more attacking than Ferland Mendy is. He's an option for sure. Like, I don't mind him. Mazraoui 4,600. That's pretty good value. I imagine he'll probably get subbed for Davies at some point. However, Bayern could just shuffle things around, bring on Davies for one of these midfielders, move from Mazraoui right back, push Kimmich up. Like they have a lot of flexibility because of how many positions these guys can really play. So he's an option too. I'd love Arda Güler start. I think there's probably zero chance, but he'd be just insane value. Camavinga just does not offer a ton of DraftKings points usually. Another guy who's pretty safe for minutes when he starts though. That's the advantage to him. At 3,800, it's like a last man in. I think you can do worse. No. These semifinal slates have been won by center backs. They've been a couple of tight ties, usually leads to set piece goals is kind of the only opportunity through, similarly to what we saw with Hummels, similarly to I'm trying to think of another. I guess maybe there hasn't been that many recently, but I just think Hummels is just in recent mind because it just happened for this PSG tie. Like I never mind throwing in a center back in any GPP build, even in cash potentially could be all right. Now Ferland Mendy, he's gonna be super popular in cash just because he's a 3K fullback. He's just awful for DFS, but just because of his position, I always end I'm a sucker just for falling for him anyway, hoping he's lucks and do an assist just from passing to the guy who dribbles past the whole team. Or just getting tackles. So he just doesn't even do that much. But he'll be popular in 3,200. I think he's probably the cheapest starter. Oh, I'm if Pavlovich is in though, he'll be joint with him. Pavlovich versus Ferdinand Mendy's a pretty close matchup. They're both fine, I suppose. But yeah, this is a much harder slate than this PSG tie. There is essentially a zero floor on Real Madrid. It's like you can go Hakimi, Mbappe, Dembele, bang. You already got three guys who are good for 10 plus points. Here, it's going to be goal contributions or bust, I feel like, largely. Makes it just really wide open in terms of what optimal can be. It makes it really wide open in terms of how we do for what you do for your cash build because of that. However, because of that, I'm going the safe options, which are Kimmich, which are Vinny Jr. Both guys who should not get subbed. Vinny gets subbed super late on, but even at 12K, I'm happy to tank it. I like the matchup. Was great at them in the first leg. Is on pens now, we've seen. And then the third slot is a little bit more difficult. I think I'd probably make it a choice of Musiala or Bellingham. I'd probably go one of these guys, maybe even both if I go punt captain and become a little bit weird. Can you go? I just want to test this real quick. If you can like captain Kimmich and then Kroos. Yeah, that's doable for sure. So yeah, I don't really want to put Kroos in core just because I'm scared of his minutes and in a high goal total game, if there's goals, like there's definitely attackers you can go over him who are not that much more because of this price bump to Tony. So yeah, I'm going Kimmich and Vinny though in cash for sure. In GPP, like you can really fade any of them just because of how these games typically go. Game script, like I always say. I think what was the optimal for today? Oh yeah, it was that Captain Coble. Like that was you can see what the game plan was. They kind of happened exactly as they had it. Captain Coble and goal off of a set piece. It had Hummels in there. I think Brandt was in there too, I want to say. And Mbappe, Dembele, Hakimi for the floors and the shots on goal into Coble, your captain. It worked out perfectly. Definitely can do something similar here with like a Captain Lunin and like Kimmich and Musiala, a decent floor and take a lot of shots. Could be perfect in that kind of sense for a build like that. But yeah, guys, that'll be it. Good luck, and I'll see you for the next slate breakdown.